All right, everyone, welcome to the Power of Our Story, First Responders Coffee and Conversation. Tonight we have Patrick Fitzgibbons. And Patrick Fitzgibbons is a retired police commander from Colorado with over 2 decades of experience in many different roles. He is an adjunct college professor. He enjoys teaching the next generation of criminal justice professionals. He's also an Army Paratrooper, former Army Paratrooper with the elite 82nd Airborne Division. And he's also an avid supporter of active military members and veterans. So he is also a personal coach and speaker and is the host of Creator of Criminal Justice Evolution, a top-ranked criminal justice podcast. He is also the author of Evolve, a collection of routines, habits, and advice to take charge of your life and be your best self. And you can find Patrick at www.cjevolution.com. And Patrick, I had to read the whole bio because it was all so good.
Well,
I didn't want to leave anything out.
I'm humbled. I'm humbled, Sarah. Thank you.
Welcome to our family here.
Yeah, I am humbled and honored to be on your show, and I appreciate it.
Well, we are excited to have you. And so I want to hand it over to you to share your story, and then we'll have some comments and question and answer afterward.
I think you covered it all. All right, we're done. No, I'm no. Again, honor to be here, Patrick, and thank you for the intro, Sarah. I appreciate it. I spent about 23 years in law enforcement in a couple different departments. As you mentioned, 2019, I left law enforcement, retired, had a great career. As the first responders on here know, it's ups and downs, but I retired on a high note, and I was proud of my career. And as the first responders know on the call, and for those who are going to listen later on, you know, law enforcement, first responders, I mean, they are dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure, stress, anxiety, all kinds of things. And my story really begins in December of 2020. You know, a couple days after Christmas, my son was home from the Air Force, and we had a great time during the holidays. But the next day, my daughter screamed. It was about 5:30 in the morning. Screamed for me, my stepdaughter, and I came running down the stairs, and I saw my son lying on the kitchen floor. He was in and out of consciousness. Obviously, I was scared. My wife was there. We were wondering what was going on. I was trying to get my son back and, you know, get him aware, you know, get him awake again, giving him sternum rubs and things like that. My wife called 911. The paramedics came. Took my son off to the hospital. We were lucky that we lived pretty close by to a hospital. You know, I was thinking it was a medical. And the reason why I say that is because I went downstairs to his room, and you know, he had thrown up all over the place. So I just, you know, I was like, okay, this has got to be a medical, you know. And so my wife and I get in the car, we head up to the hospital. And then I meet my son in the ER. You know, we had COVID during that time, you know, so only one of us could go back there. I met my son. They were taking care of him. He was becoming more aware. You know, I grabbed his hand, sat down. I said, you know, what happened, buddy? And he said, you know, I don't know, Dad. I just came up the stairs and fell onto the kitchen floor. And I said, well, they're gonna take care of you. You know, you're in good hands. So when I left his room, my stepdaughter, who found him, she texted me and said, hey, I need you to give me a call. And so I called her, and she had gone downstairs to start cleaning his room, and she found a bunch of suicide notes. And she told me that, and my heart sank. And, you know, I was just devastated. So I think that was the longest walk I had to take back to the room where my son was at. And, you know, went in there, sat down, I was crying, grabbed his hand and said, buddy, you know, what's going on? I said, did you try to, you know, hurt yourself? And he was crying, and he said, yeah, Dad, I did. And I'm sorry, it's hard for me to tell this story, but I said, okay, you're gonna get the best help. The Air Force, you know, knew where he was at. I was in, you know, contact with his chain of command. His chain of command called me right away. And so another hard thing I had to do was he wouldn't give me a reason why he did it. I didn't ask, I didn't pry. I thought it was brave enough for him to, say that in the first place. So I went to the doctor who I knew, since it's a small area where I was a police officer. And I said, my son tried to kill himself. And they put him on a hold. Here in Colorado, it's called an M1. It's a 72-hour mental health hold. And they took him off. He was in a hospital locally for a while, and then the Air Force came and scooped him up. And he got, I can't say enough good things about the Air Force, because they had some of the best treatment for my son available. And when I was in the military, Sarah, I was in 20-something years ago, it was a lot different. I think the military has made huge leaps and bounds with mental health services for their active duty service members and their veterans, but we still have a lot of work to do. But anyway, so after that incident, I started to go downhill. I started to isolate. I started to push my wife away, push my other child, my other daughter away. They were reaching out to me. They saw what was happening. And in my mind, I thought I was protecting them, I was just, it was crazy it might sound. I thought I was protecting them by isolating, drinking, and then to top it off, I was a first responder. I was a former military. And then when I was in, I was just conditioned to suppress, to pack it away. And that was, more conditioning in law enforcement. Not everybody, but I mean, that's what I was taught. You just kind of, throw it away, or not throw it away, but, suppress it. So at around April of 2020, I went to Arizona. My wife, said, hey, maybe you need some time alone. Came back from Arizona, and my wife and I decided to get a divorce. And it was painful for both of us. But again, I take, a lot of that responsibility, because I was just in that bad state. So, we went through that. It just recently ended about a month ago. But during that time, I just I kept falling and falling and falling into a depression, isolation. I didn't want to do anything. I was deteriorating physically, mentally, to the point where one night I just said, I'm just gonna kill myself. First responders, we have obviously the means. Like a lot of people, I have a lot of guns. So I remember lying in bed, and I had been drinking, and I wanted to kind of be in that state where I was at least intoxicated. And so I remember lying in my bed, and I had a 9mm next to me, and I had decided I was going to shoot myself in the head, but I couldn't will myself to put the gun to my head. I lifted it a little bit, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't, because I kept thinking about my son and my daughter and my other family members. So I put my gun down, and I reached for my phone. I reached out to a trusted friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. She asked me if she could contact my brother and sister. And I said, absolutely. I need to do something, or I'm going to hurt myself. And so she contacted my brother and sister. My brother was out of town, but my sister lives local in the Denver area. So she rushed to the house. We cried. I told her, the shed in the backyard was where I was going to kill myself. And she said, I'm taking you, you need to go to the hospital. Went to the hospital. I was there for about 6 hours, didn't like it. I did it voluntarily. I knew I could walk away. They encouraged me to stay. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I just didn't like the environment. And a lot of my ego came into play. I said, hey, I don't, I'm fine. I don't need to be here. But when we left, I started thinking about a program that through my show that I've had guests on that talked about this program in Florida. I knew I needed help. I knew I needed some mental health help for PTSD, suppression, or anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. So I started making some calls with my network, started calling some friends. And within 48 hours, I was down in Florida at a facility that is specifically designed for first responders and veterans. And I was there for about a month, and it was some of the best therapy I ever received in my life. So again, that's my story. That's my mental health journey, and I'm doing a lot better. I'm reset, as they say, and I'm just glad to be here and glad to be alive and glad to be on the show.
Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your story. That's really powerful. That I can't imagine what that was like for you to, see your son and go through that with your son.
Yeah.
And did everything bubble up, just all the trauma of all your service? Just
Yeah.
when was that like the last straw, the trigger?
It was. That's a great question, and it was. And this came out in my therapy, where all those images, trauma, death, sorrow that I saw in the military, and compounded with when I saw my sons, Sarah, on the floor in the kitchen, everything started flooding back. And all the death I'd seen, I did a really good job. I think most first responders, we do a good job, like I said before, of pushing things down, just compartmentalizing things. And so I started having bad dreams, but I said, hey, I can do this. But to your point, yeah, everything started flooding back and I just went downhill.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have heard a few stories like that. That people have kind of gutted out, till, 20 years or whatever. And they think they're okay, that it's hard. And then it's either an end to the marriage or it's surviving a suicide loss.
Yeah.
That it can be that last straw where everything unravels. And gosh, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that you're okay, that you've had that reset.
Yeah.
And thank you for having the courage to share the story so that it empowers other people to reach out if they're not doing well.
Well, I appreciate it, Sarah. That's one of the problems we have in law enforcement, I think, because I was at those levels in law enforcement. I think we've come a long way since I got into this great profession, but I think we have a long way to go because there's still so much of a stigma behind mental health. And, where a lot of officers, I talk to a lot of officers where they're afraid to come forward because they don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want their partner or partners to not want to work with them or not trust them anymore. And, that's the one thing I encourage people to do, because I've been in those dark places. I've been hanging on that ledge with 3 fingers to reach out. And there's so many resources out there to reach out to friends, not just friends, but trusted friends, people that you trust, to help you, because there's so many resources out there for our first responders. But unfortunately, a lot of our first responders and veterans too, they choose to suffer in silence, and they're just so afraid to speak up and get some help. So my mission now, through my show and through other work I'm going to do with first responders in the veteran community, is to bring, and people say, all right, we would need to bring more awareness. Okay, that's great. And I believe in that, but we need to put action behind that. Mm-hmm. We need to put a lot of action behind just the awareness, because that's a buzzword now. And I have no problem with the word, but we need to put more action, resources, facilities for our first responders and veteran communities. And I think we've come a long way since I was younger, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. People are saying the same thing there. It's definitely the theme. And so it seems like things are starting to happen, which is really great. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing to kind of pay it forward and help in the areas that you've learned. Chris, you want to say something?
First of all, Patrick, thank you so much for sharing that and having the courage and the vulnerability and transparency to do that. Yeah. I think that these talks are very much needed to normalize these conversations. And I think that's why we have to take away is the courage needed to have these conversations is to normalize it. So I very much applaud you for that. Now, question from the law enforcement perspective, being a former commander and a military guy. From your perspective, retroactively, and again, I'm so happy that you and your son are still here. God is great. How do you think that we go back or not go back, start now to prepare people to deal with the traumas that we see every day the acts that we are sometimes forced upon us to make us healthier. All the peer support stuff and things we do now are very, very retroactive. Mm-hmm. What do you think looking back, what can we do to preemptively, proactively address this issue?
That's a great question, brother. And, I think part of the thing we can do to try to mitigate this is to kind of start more of the awareness and more of the training in the academies. I know here in where I'm at, there's a very small chunk, and I understand with post requirements and any other requirements, and there's a lot of stuff, as everybody knows here, who, as a first responder, there's a lot of stuff jammed at you. But I think one of the ways to mitigate it or help, not necessarily solve it, but to help mitigate it is to bring more training and awareness and uncover this more in the academies. That's, as well as other, EAP and other stuff that we have out there. But I think it starts in, in the academies. I think it starts with commanders. I think it starts with a leader in the executive leadership within organizations to not only, talk the talk, but to walk the walk too. So I think, again, we've come a long way, man, but we need to do a lot more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, did you want to say something? Oh, Todd, you're muted.
First, brother, even though I was a firefighter, you were law enforcement, some real parallels there. I've told people that I know exactly what the trigger pull was on my Colt, but I don't know how much of it I had left. Before I saw a vision of my 4 daughters, and that's the only thing that kept me from using that last pound or so. I think, Chris, and you have a great point. In the fire department, if we're fighting a fire, we failed somewhere in fire prevention, and that's what we're all doing right now. Is we're all fighting fires, mm-hmm. and I don't think we're doing enough to prevent those fires from happening. My fire service was many years ago. It was in the mm-hmm. 80s, and critical incident stress management consisted of, suck it up. The next call's on its way, and you need to be ready. And that obviously doesn't work. But I think we need to look not only inside agencies but outside, because I think even if we
Absolutely.
even if we have a lot of resources inside of agencies, and I've talked to some of the local firefighters here in Iowa, that they even if there were a lot of resources available inside their agency, they're reluctant to do that.
Absolutely.
Because they're just not, I don't think they trust that it's going to be confidential.
And you bring up a good point.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sir, I'm sorry. I was just commenting. You bring up an excellent point. It's a trust issue.
Yeah. And I'm training with an organization, the U.S. Chaplains Task Force. It grew out of the New York State Chaplain Task Force, and we're trying to get an organization called FRAT, First Responder Assistance Teams. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need resources inside our agencies, but I think we need independent organizations as well that can reach out with peer support specialists. We all know, every one of us know, that there's, valid or not, there's a inherent mistrust of confiding in someone outside the first responder family. And I think that mistrust keeps so many from coming forward and seeking help. And I think we really need to focus both inside and outside of our agencies, because we need to build resilient officers and firefighters, or we're just going to keep fighting fires like we are now.
Yeah, very well said, sir. And I absolutely agree with you. And I had some resources that were probably available to me through my last department, but I chose to go to Florida at a place called Shatterproof. and it's designed specifically for first responders, fire, EMS, law enforcement. And the interesting thing about this program is 80% of the staff there, clinicians, counselors, are former first responders. And there were people all over the country there. And, you know, it's powerful when you get those groups of individuals in a room in a counseling session. We go and we tell our story, and we're crying, we're embracing, you know. So I agree with you that there needs to be 100%, that we need to have other resources coupled with internal resources to do more for our first responders. And I thank God every day that I had this opportunity to go to Shatterproof, which is down in Florida, Deerfield Beach. And it's amazing. It's the first of, you know, I think there's only one in the country, and it's down in Florida. So, and they have, like I said, first responders from everywhere coming to this program.
Sounds good. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a bunch of notes here that I kind of wanted to run through with you. So pardon me for being long-winded, but thank you, number one, for sharing your story. It's so powerful. And the connection that you have with your son and both of your parallel experiences, I think I'd be curious to know if that bonds you together or pushes you further apart, and how that relationship is now. But we'll start there.
Great question, brother. And my son and I are probably closer than ever now. And when I was going through those dark periods not too long ago, my son, my 20-year-old son, soon to be 21, was giving me comfort and giving me some of the tools that he had learned when he went through his treatment. And it was very powerful. So I am extremely close to both my kids. Yes, I am very close to my son. Talk to him almost every day. When I was down in Florida, talk to him and my daughter, let them know I was okay. Because the one thing I failed to mention in my story is I was dumping, I was venting, I was texting my kids during those dark periods, putting them through the hell that I was going through, texting them by saying, you know, when I'm gone, I want you, here's how here's how I've split up whatever I have, the property, you know, and putting them through that. And they were pleading with me through text, phone call. Dad, don't hurt yourself. Don't kill yourself. We love you. We need you. Mm-hmm. So I'm extremely close to my kids. And if anything, this brought us closer, not just with my children, but with my family, because I did a good job. Again, I mentioned a couple of times before, is suppressing. My brothers, my siblings, whom I'm very close to, had no idea what was going on. I was really good, brother, at putting on a happy face and playing the role, but deep down I was suffering. My siblings knew something was wrong, but until I finally came forward and said, yeah, I want to end my life, it was aha. It was we knew something was wrong. But again, you know, they didn't, you know, it's so hard with relatives sometimes, because sometimes they know something's going wrong, but they don't want to be that person. I'm not faulting them for that. They don't want to be that person, or they're too scared to come forward and say, hey, do you want to hurt yourself? As a matter of fact, my sister asked me months ago, are you feeling okay? Are you having any weird thoughts? I said, no, when I was having those suicidal ideation thoughts. So, but yes, I am extremely close to my family, very close to my kids.
The one thing that caught my attention holistically from your story was the timeline. Mm-hmm. And while there's certainly in all of our worlds, an accumulation of things when we get to our breaking point, but your spiral seemed to happen so fast.
Yeah.
Following the moments in the hospital with your son, like that, when you're going through the timeline and talking dates, I'm like, wow, that's crazy how fast. And now you're back here and like you're in good shape, which is freaking awesome. Does that shock you, that timeline, or is it?
You know, it was just
back. Do you recognize the lead up to that we don't see?
Well, it was a culmination of just various events. I lost my father. I was really close to, or my family, my siblings and grandkids were close to my father. I lost him in 2019. Very close to my dad. He was an Air Force veteran, a colonel in the Air Force. and lost him. That was very tough. And then it was my son and his attempt. And then it was going through a very painful divorce. And so it was painful for both my ex-wife and I. It was very, very painful. But it was just like, yes, am I surprised it happened so quick? I am, and I'm not, because again, like I said before, I was really good after 20 something years of in law enforcement and some of that in the military, of just compartmentalizing until I got to the point, and drinking obviously didn't help, with just going downhill. As a matter of fact, I got a really good job during that time period, but I quit after a week because I didn't even want to get out of bed, brother. I didn't even want to get out of bed. I'd get out of the bed. I would wait till the liquor store opened up. I'd go there, start drinking. And I just wanted the pain to end. I wanted it to end. And so, yeah, yes and no, in retrospect. I mean, it happened very, very quickly, but it seemed like so long when I was going through that. And looking back on it, to your point, yes, it happened very, very quickly. It happened within a year. But that's what PTSD does. It sneaks up on us. You all, or a lot of you, have experienced it. A lot of you are still going through it. But yes, it was, because I've always been, very, very strong. I still am. And I thought I could just do it alone. You can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You need that help. And first responders, if you're listening, the ones who are going to listen to this later on, if you are suffering, you need to reach out. We need you. Your family needs you. And contrary to what the media says, the majority of people out there support and love our first responders. I wish they were more vocal about it.
100%. No, I agree with that 100%. So it was interesting that you were talking about the, what Todd had brought up about starting this earlier, resilience in the police academy and stuff like that. In New Jersey, we're now doing that, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we have something here called the RPO program, which is Resiliency Program Officers. And it's the agency can send somebody to the program, and it's like the go-to person in your agency to talk to, but they're bringing that concept into the police academies. They're teaching resilience in the police academy. And it's been extremely helpful. Guys are officers are coming out of the academy with a different outlook into the profession. They're going to start mandating regular check-ins with your RPO and all that.
Excellent.
Stuff. So that's what we're doing here in New Jersey. And we also have a nonprofit that I happen to be part of that we're going around to different agencies throughout the country and teaching the resiliency program. And hopefully the goal is to then bring that back down to the organic level, and it'll build itself back up again. That's, you're 100% correct. The starting in the academy is the place to go, rather than, first day where everybody's getting their bags wet and bringing them back into the car, out of the car, and the car out of the car, and chasing around the parking lot by drill instructors. Those days are over, I think.
It's a great point, brother. And, look, we all know that it always comes down to the individual too. So I'm a big believer in nutrition, fitness, taking care of your body,
100%.
Physically, because without your body, we all know you need your body, you need your mind. So ultimately it comes down to the individual. I mean, you can teach this stuff all day long, but it's up to the individual to take care of themselves. I know it's tough. I've been on those graveyards for years and things like that. People say, well, your cops would tell me, well, I can't eat right. Nothing's open. Okay, pack your lunch, take care of yourself. Try to, it's hard on the circadian rhythm. We know that, but you need to try to take care of yourself physically as best as possible. And I was guilty of not doing that early in my career. And again, you don't take care of your body and your mind, everything else suffers.
100%. Yeah. So thank you for all that you're doing. And
thank you,
certainly
sir.
love to catch up with you offline and talk more. You're fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks. How about Janet, and then Brenda, and then Ryan?
Thanks, Patrick. I had the fortune or misfortune of how I was diagnosed is because I thought it was something else. And I think sometimes we find out by accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in a bad car accident. I found myself in the middle of the night one night crying, wishing I had died in it. Yeah. And I call it the night the mask cracked. and wrote about it. This was 2003, and didn't write about it until 2011. But I had that light. It was like, you need help. And I share wherever I can that the first psychologist I saw, I wouldn't give you 2 cents for.
Yeah.
And never, ever, ever work with anybody you don't feel comfortable with. She gave me the one that I finally found. She gave me the most amazing tools. And this is, just think about this for a minute. 2003, police dispatcher. Nobody's acknowledging that police officers have PTSD, never mind the dispatchers that take those calls.
Yes.
And she just took one, my first session, she says, this has nothing to do with the car accident, except everything to do with your job. And so I was fortunate enough that I was off work for the car accident, that I didn't have to get my police force involved in any of it.
Mm-hmm.
So my diagnosis, I didn't have to tell, I shared what I was doing. But then the day that she said to me, she says, you don't have to work with me anymore. I says, oh my God, now what? Because there's nothing after that. After you remove that angst in that place you were, there is nothing after that to help you. And so I just sort of went crazy doing personal development stuff and all kinds of training and stuff. And it wasn't until 2010, I met Jack Canfield and started training with him.
Oh, wow.
And 2011, after our first week-long training, I sat down and wrote that piece. And Sarah, I just sent it to you because I don't know how to put it in anything, but but that went back. That's a long time. But I know what I was doing was staying so busy that I didn't have to think about anything else. Yeah. I just was busy learning. And then ended up with a pulmonary embolism. So I had to wake up or, do something with your life and make a change. And we all have to realize that, one day we say God has a plan. And if we don't listen, he's shown me definitely that he can take me out at any time. So anyways, I want to thank you. I one of the things that I always talk about is trauma aware, connect, recovery, and celebration. I think we always forget celebration. And for my 50th birthday, I told my daughter I nearly didn't make it. You damn well better put a good party out. So on that, I'll leave it. I'm glad we're connected. I'm glad you're here.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, and a powerful story, and I am glad you're here. And you made a good point about dispatchers. At least where I'm at, and I hope in most everywhere in the country that dispatchers are finally being recognized as first responders, because for a long time we didn't. And you made a great point. Obviously, the first point of contact is that dispatcher. And they might not be on the scene, but they're hearing that. And they're hearing that trauma or whatever's going on the other side of the line. And it's they deal with the same stuff.
Well, it's a helplessness. Like,
yes.
We can't do anything. You get on scene, you are in the action, but we're going to the next call. Yeah.
And powerful story. Thank you. And again, I'm glad you're here. And life is precious. Here's an interesting statistic that I learned a couple of years ago. I remember seeing a keynote by Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you know who that is, but he came out on this stage, and the first thing he said was 400 trillion to 1. And people are kind of looking at him like, what's going on? That is the statistical probability of being born as a human. So it really is a blessing by the grace of God, or whoever you believe in, whatever you believe in, that we're here. It's a miracle. So make good time of it. Take care of yourself. Thank you for your story, ma'am. Very powerful.
That's awesome. Brenda.
So I mentioned I'm a nurse. I case managed and did preventative medicine for years in my career. So when I had my own personal stuff go on, I had a friend who was a colleague and also a good friend take her life. So that was really rough. That was kind of like my first introduction to, not to death, but to a death that was connected to me personally.
Hey, Brenda, it's a little bit hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So that was the first time that it was a death that was personal, connected to me.
Mhm.
Death in the workplace, we have that turn it off and keep
Yeah.
it moving, turn it off and keep it moving. You hear, I worked, like I said, case management. I used to see patients in their homes. I also worked fast track, urgent care, did all of that stuff, clinical stuff. So I kind of was in a lot of different areas, seeing different stages of people. And so that grief, when it came close to me in the workplace, I could deal with it, shut it off, keep working, keep it moving. When it hit me personally, it was a different story. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to deal with that personally. And so in the course of moving along, I lost another friend. And then I lost more people.
Yeah.
So it was a lot on top of a lot on top of a lot. And the people that I would have leaned to were the people that had passed. Those were my steady pillars.
Yeah.
So when I was going through my own stuff, they kept saying it's mental, it's this, it's your fault, you work too much, you this, you that, I heard every negative thing that there was. And when I knew I needed to go in, to get treatment because I was in a dark place, I was depressed, but I was that person that could put the smile on, go to work, do my thing and come home, and nobody knew.
Yeah.
I dated a physician who had absolutely no clue. That's how good I was at hiding it. And so when I went through this ugly process of learning how to deal with things and see things that was going on, it wasn't until I had a physician tell me, sweetheart, there's nothing wrong with you. You just never learned to grieve.
Yeah.
And that is huge. And so as a nurse, I've learned, dealing with my patients, they grieve, death is coming. They don't want to process it. They don't want to face it, the family. So I've learned how to deal with those things in the workplace, but to deal with them and apply them to me as the patient was so different.
Yeah.
And when I went in, I had, the very first time I went in, I had a physician tell me, whatever you do, don't tell your colleagues because nobody is going to want to work with you.
Yeah.
Okay. That is the worst thing you could tell me as a nurse. I take care of everyone. I'm so busy taking care of everyone. We're nurses. We're supposed to help others. Yet you're telling me I can't even share with my colleagues because it's going to ruin my career. Like, how the hell does that work?
Yeah. Doesn't work.
We're in the field to help each other, yet as colleagues, we can't even help each other because we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So through the years of me dealing with my stuff and getting back to where I was, I started to work with suicide prevention. We have to find something to put our energy into. And because I lost a friend to that, that's where I went. And because I struggled through it personally, I can actually say, I've been there. I know what this feels like. I know, it's a different connection to come at you saying, it's happened to me too. It's a completely different connection when I come at you as a nurse and I say, this happened to me too. When I go talk with first responders and law enforcement or veterans, and I come to them, I'm a nurse, but I also went through this too. I'm one of you. Yeah. And so that connection that I have when I'm out in the public talking with law enforcement at their, at the academy, at their health fairs, at their events, they're more likely to open up because I've been through it, because I am a nurse.
Absolutely.
But so I know firsthand, I can't even begin to tell you how many times the officers, even lieutenants and sergeants, have asked me for resources outside of the department because they don't want to go to the department. You know how that works. They don't want it within the department. So I struggled with dealing with my own stuff, as well as being the person who's put together, being out in the public, helping others, because that's what I do. I'm a nurse. And it wasn't until a mentor that I had, who was part of this reason why I had this big struggle in work and workers' comp and everything. Years later, he took his own life. We're talking a mentor who was a pillar in the community. Everybody knew him in the programs. That was my mentor for 15 years. So when he took his life, because he couldn't deal with things that were going on in his life, and he literally jumped off a bridge, at that point, I think something in me clicked that, if it could happen to him, and that was my mentor, and I made it through, I have no reason to have shame. I have no reason to have stigma.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you doing now?
I'm not going to let anyone on me as the first responder. I learned that my personal story and experience was more valuable than me as a nurse.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. But so that's why now, I mean, when I was at the academy one time, I told them, you know, in front of the entire event, I said, you know, one of you took me on a 5150. And, you know, the officers, they had lost a detective, and, you know, they giggled and they laughed, but they knew at that point, like, you know, this is real. I'm here preaching this to you. But at one point, you were the ones that were there to help me. And that's where I feel, as first responders, like you said, we need to help each other, which is why when I'm out there talking to the community, I, you know, it's so passionate in me. And when I'm frustrated that, you know, I just want to be retired, I don't want to do this anymore. I know the difference that it's making. And unless people like you and me and the others in this group continue to talk and speak about it and say, this is what's happening, this is real, it needs to be addressed. It's been happening for years, only now it's no longer swept under the rug. The public is aware of it, and it's in your face because of COVID and everything in mental health, everything that's they've gone through. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm out there in the trenches doing it too. And nobody's going to get the help for our coworkers and our colleagues unless we are the ones that continue to tell our story and open up and be vulnerable and share the things that happen to us, so that those that are afraid of the stigma know it's okay.
Yeah. And how are you doing, Brenda? Are you doing good?
Oh, I'm good. I'm at a good point.
Good.
I'm dealing with some health issues, and I am convinced 100% that my autoimmune issues are as a result of all of that high-strung stress on my body. But we're good. I hit a good point. I worked my very first event last night, 12 hours. So I am extremely exhausted today, but it's good. It's good. And, you know, I know that, you know, we talk about spirituality and religion. That's what saved me, my faith.
Yeah.
I had to lean 100% on my faith. And even now I know when I get tired and I don't want to do it anymore and do something else, I know that there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
And why I'm humble about it, but why I'm good at what I do, because I've been through it.
Yeah. Well, God bless you, Brenda. Thank you for sharing that and sharing your story. And it was very powerful. And the one thing that you said, I mean, it was all very, very good, but you said, you know, when you're dealing with trauma after trauma after trauma, you know, we have to suppress as first responders to some degree. Suppression is not a bad thing. It's okay to pack it away, because that's what keeps us going from call to call to call. But the problem is, a lot of us, I use the analogy of a suitcase. We pack it in a suitcase and we don't unpack the suitcase. You know, we just, and we're really good at packing it, and it's okay to do that sometimes, but we have to learn to unpack the suitcase. And that was my problem.
Absolutely. I used to joke, you know, we used to joke, I'm like, I got enough baggage to fill a cruise ship. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, and it gets heavy after a while. But the thing was, I didn't know all of this.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't learn I mean, I was told I had PTSD, but I didn't learn like the analogies that law enforcement use and how veterans are together. And it was a different world for me to step into that world, having gone through the experiences, not being in that world. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it does.
then I learned so much more, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. You know, now I get it. You know, it made more sense. So that's why I've gravitated as far as doing like first responders and law enforcement.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, to tell my story, I had so much stigma and shame. And now I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care who knows. If my mentor of all those years, who was a pillar in the community, could take his own life out of left field, you know, what do I have to be ashamed of?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, you know, not too long ago, I was fearful, you know, of telling anybody. But to your point, I don't care what people think. I don't. If I can help one person out there, just like you're doing and everybody on this panel, then I'm happy that I can help one person. and to your point, I mean, I don't care anymore what people think. I'm going to tell my story in an effort to help as many people as I can. So God bless you. Thank you for sharing that.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Brenda. We have 3 people who would love to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Would you be open to hearing their questions? I know we were
Absolutely.
wrapping up at
Absolutely.
7.
This is a great discussion. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, Ryan.
Hey, Patrick. First off, thanks for sharing. And it's definitely a powerful story. I'm going to kind of lean on the question side of things here, leaning on your experience for 23 years. Kind of give you a brief history here. I got 6 years on the job, but I'm starting to move up through the ranks, and I'm an instructor within my department within the state of South Carolina. And we all know it's fairly common to teach the suicide prevention, suicide identification, and stuff like that. And we normally teach the canned, signs and symptoms. But
Sure.
Outside of those, I mean, from what you went through, and I mean, you hit it on the head where we got to just pack it away, move on to the next one, and we never unpack it. What on the deeper aspect as a coworker, supervisor, leader within a department, maybe what are some other things that you can recommend to be able to identify maybe a younger or even older officer going through some hard times?
Great question, brother. I think we're really good as first responders we're very astute. We're very perceptive to what's going on, or at least, people within an organization, what's going on with their crew, their teammate, their partner, whatever. The problem that we have, if you have an officer that comes to work that's normally a go-getter, he or she are just going out there, they're kicking butt, you're very productive, they're handling their cases, whatever, and then suddenly they take a dive. I think we owe it to each other, no matter how uncomfortable it is to go to that person and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? But the problem we have, and I'm not, saying this all in law enforcement, my department was very, very good, my last department with that. Hey, they would approach and what's going on? But too many times we see the signs, brother. We see, okay, the body posture. We see all that stuff and we don't say anything. We don't say anything. We just kind of let it go until, God forbid, something happens. So the signs, I think, are relatively, everybody on this panel knows, okay, if you have somebody that's coming withdrawn, they're calling in sick, all the time, they're not, the production's going down and things like that, something's going on in their life. And it could be something, okay, it may not be that serious, but a lot of times people just don't want to say anything. So I think first responders most of us are very good at recognizing signs because we're out there doing it every day. We're reading body language. We're doing all that stuff. But we have an inherent problem, again, not everybody, with seeing the signs and not saying anything. We don't do it because we don't want to be that guy or that girl that goes to that person, the other officer, our partner, a fellow officer, and says, what's going on? If I can't help you, we're going to take it up the flagpole because you need some help. But a lot of time, and I saw it throughout my career, unfortunately, we're just not going to say anything to Pat. We're not going to say anything. We don't want to upset him, or we don't want to upset this person. It's his business. That's a problem, man. That's a huge problem. And I'm glad it's changing, but we need to do more and more work towards that. And it starts with the top down. Some departments are good than others. Like I said, my last department was very good, great command staff. But a lot of departments are not good with that.
Right.
They're not good with it. So I hope I answered your question, brother.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback that off real quick too. So I'm actually a lesson plan writer for both my department and the state training. And what would be one thing that you would recommend that would absolutely be 100%, I guess the most important to be put into something like that to start training new recruits and, reoccurring block trainings and as well, things like that.
There's a really good friend of mine. He's the chief of police out in Pinole, California. His name is Neil Gang. And he came up with a program, or he came up with a model called the Asher model. And it talks specifically to mental health and wellness and other things, leadership. And I'm not going to get into it, but it's a very good piece of information that you can incorporate into your curriculum. So I think the more information, the better. The more resources out there, the better. I mean, somebody said earlier, and I agree 100%, outside resources doesn't have to be inside all the time. There's so much information out there. There's so many experts out there that can help our brave men and women. So in the show notes, I'll put my friend Neil Gang's information out there, and you can contact him. You go to his website too, the police department website. And I think that'd be a great model to incorporate into your program.
I appreciate that. And, once again, thanks for coming on and sharing and, helping make a change out here.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, and then Paul.
First of all, thank you, sir, for taking my question. So kind of piggybacking off what you're saying about how we need to get out and help others. When I had my brain injury, I had frontal lobe damage and I had some neuroencephalopathy.
Yeah.
I was in the hospital for a long time. I was in brain rehab for 10 months. The problem that I faced was I could no longer compartmentalize what I dealt with at work. I used to be able to store it in the back of my head and never see it again. Well, I had frontal lobe damage, so my head was flooded with a lot of different calls I were on. So I had a psychiatrist that had put me on such an incredible amount of prescription medications. I was on Lexapro, Wellbutrin, Haldol, Trazodone, Promethazine. I mean, all they would do was give me more
Exactly.
shit, because basically, if I don't talk, things are good. Well, they ended up, and of course, for my culture, your culture, being on a SWAT team, TAC team, now this shit doesn't exist. There's no PTSD, or this is, you can't see the injury, you're faking it. So the doctor gave me Klonopin, and my mom and wife were home, and my wife looked at me and she said, "You're drooling. What's going on?" I was so basically like a living zombie. That night, I did $18,000 in damage to my house. I don't remember any of it. I don't remember any of it. So there were a lot of other issues I had because I was at home, wasn't doing what I was born to do. They were giving me, I was on 2 milligrams of Xanax, 40 milligrams of Adderall XR, Depakote, Seroquel IR, Seroquel XR, held all the sleep. So I'm sitting at home by myself, and all I could think of, I used to go to calls to protect people from people like me because I couldn't control my outbursts. So there was a night that I was done dealing with everything. I was done. I was going to get that control back. I don't know how. To this day, I'll never be able to figure out who did it. But the Wounded Blue called me. It was at 2:34 in the morning. And I had already had the mindset, I'm done. This is it. So ultimately, they got me to, kind of talk me down. Unfortunately, I honestly had issues with the meds that they were giving me because the meds were counteracting each other. They had, 2 milligrams of Xanax, 40 milligrams of Adderall XR on top of 1,000 milligrams of Depakote, and so on. So I never used to drink because I have an autoimmune disease. But when I was at home by myself, I knew my life was over. I hadn't gotten this mindset of, I'm really on this earth to be a father and then a cop. I was in the mindset, no, this is my world. So I started using more Xanax because there were 3 calls that I went to that were the most horrific, unbelievable calls ever, and they involved children. And I would think about it day in and day out. So it got to the point where I didn't want to take a Xanax to fall asleep because I would know it would take about a half hour. And then that half hour, I'm thinking I'm getting ready to go to war in my head. So then I started doubling up on Trazodone, Haldol. My wife came down one time and I was laying on the ground. So moral of my story is spreading that awareness, because I had to I fought for a year and 9 months to go back to work. I actually ended up making it back to the road, back to SWAT, and to prove a point, I went and got hired at the academy to teach. Well, my cognitive issues came up. I started getting lost and just all kinds of things that were just basically preventing me from going back and staying back. So I had some contacts over at the Wounded Blue. they helped me get through everything. And then when I got to the point where I was good for me, I told Randy Sutton, is the founder of the Wounded Blue, I said, I'm dedicating the rest of my life to this organization. Once I'm good for me, then this is what I want to do. And my thing is, we all know that cops are cynical bastards. And if you want to talk to an officer, you got about 3 seconds before they make up a decision. Am I going to listen to this guy or not?
Absolutely.
So I've decided, instead of sitting at home, being, sad, upset, popping pills, I said, you know what, if I can't wear a uniform anymore, if I can't put that set of fatigues on to go do door raids and stuff, then I can serve in a different way. So I always taught my recruits, if you ever tell somebody that you understand, you better walk in their shoes, because if not, you sympathize. So I finally got to the point where I was good, and I became a peer advocate with the Wounded Blue. And my passion is, I had a lot of struggles, and part of it was with the prescription meds they give me. So now I like to talk about my issues.
Yeah.
I don't glorify them, but to look at an officer and say, hey, I had my college paid for by the police department. I was a cop at 20. I couldn't even buy rounds for my off-duty gun. I was that guy. I was, it was like straight line on tag team and everything. Meanwhile, I'm at home and I am just an absolute zombie. And I hated myself. I hated my life. So I started working as a peer advocate, because I feel, instead of keeping my struggles to myself and feeling like a baby and staying at home and be selfish, I need to get back out there, because I have the ability to tell officers, I understand when it comes to the pills. I understand when it comes to the alcohol. I understand when you try to kill yourself and it doesn't work. And basically, I've come to peace with what I did and how I was coping. So now I do the best I can to reach out. I talk about my struggles. I talk about the addictions that I had. Not
That's
because I'm proud
powerful.
of it, because absolutely, I used to be that guy in training when somebody would come in and go, shit, I really need help, but I wouldn't say shit.
Yeah.
So my thing is, if I can talk about my struggles, I've come to peace with it. I've humbled myself. If I can just get one person to understand they're not alone, just because you're on SWAT, just because you're on the road patrol, there's gonna be issues at home and nobody talks about it. So I try to talk about it as much as I can. I go into detail about my issues with my meds, because I know there's others out there that are still suffering. So I just want to say, you guys are 100% on point when you say we got to start doing more. We got to have action. And this is my way of still being an officer. It's just letting people know, hey, I was no different than that guy on the street holding up a sign that says, I want money. The difference was he at least had the motivation to go out there and ask for money. I was sitting on my couch because I was embarrassed. So in fact, that guy was better than I was. Meanwhile, I was just getting pumped full of medication. And I know that a lot of officers can relate to that.
Yeah.
And I think my goal is just to say, hey, you're not alone. I'm not proud of what I did, but I was that guy, and I was a pill junkie at that point. So that's all. I just wanted to tell you that. I appreciate everything you're saying. And I just want to back up the fact that you're right. You got to have action to get out there. Police suicides are just too much. So,
well, God bless you, brother. And you made a really good point really quick about medication. The one thing, and I take medication, and this is an indictment on the medical profession, what I'm about to say, but we are too quick to just throw pills at most of the time.
Correct.
And the one thing I know is I control my treatment. I control it. And I'm not saying anything bad about medical professionals. I'm not against medication, because I take it, you take it, a lot of people take it. We need it. But I think we live in a society sometimes where we're so quick to just pile the medications on.
Well, and because mine was work related. So they told me flat out, hey, you're going to be the first case of a head injury that actually made it back to work after 10 months of brain rehab. They knew the medications that I were on. So to make sure that I was taking them, I would have to go submit and get labs done. Yeah. So if I didn't take them, I could absolutely lose my pension, everything. Absolutely. And, it was a horrible feeling. It was absolutely horrible. And I just, I'm getting it. Unfortunately, my wife is left. My children are my whole world. I have no mom, no father, aunts, uncles, cousins, anything. My children are all I need, but they're with their mom half the time. So actually on the 23rd, we finalized our divorce.
Yeah.
And, you know, here I am alone. And it's my fault because I would do things, act out because of my injuries that I would normally never have done. And I've driven everybody out of my life. And it sucks. But you know what? That's one more tool I can put in my toolbox to relate to another officer and tell them I understand.
Yeah. Powerful, brother.
I have no problems putting that out there.
I don't either. And to you and other people that are listening, look, my phone is always ready for you, brother. If anybody out there needs to talk, I'm here. I talk to people all the time through the program I went through. You know, we need to take care of each other, you know, and I'm not just BSing out there. If you need to talk to me or if I can direct you to resources or whatever, you reach out to me, brother. All right. Sarah can give you my contact information.
I would like to. I really wouldn't. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, my friend. You're welcome. Thank you for your story, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Aaron, I'm so glad that you're joining us. You are so much part of the family. You are not alone. We are here for you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. It's just
God bless you, brother.
You know, if one person hears and I can change at least one life or make somebody not feel alone, mission successful.
Absolutely, brother. God bless you, man.
Awesome.
God bless.
Then we have one last question, Paul. Good to see you, Paul.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Good to have you.
Hey, Patrick, give me just 1 second. Brenda, thank you for what you said. And I didn't share this when I presented a couple of weeks ago, but my sergeant in Cairo took his life. And that's why I do what I do. Because he was that larger than life mentor. And Aaron, you know, Patrick is exactly right. You know, Tom and Jen sat earlier on a couple of weeks ago, and his story is just like yours. He was on 14 medications coming out of Delta Force.
Okay.
And if I might just really respectfully share something with you,
Please.
that you said something about it being your fault, I would suggest just a slightly different thing where you are, that you've taken the step of saying I'm responsible for my life.
Absolutely.
And I know it sounds so minor to make those little word changes, but you really have. Just what you shared. Patrick is obviously affirming that. And I know that.
And I'm very thankful for that. I really appreciate that. I really do.
And these are some really good people. We go back through the other episodes and listen to some of the stories. But I can tell you, Patrick, the little bit I've known about him, I just run into him. I can tell you his network is solid, mine is too. I know we would be happy to get you in touch with people.
Thank you.
Absolutely, brother.
Really
we're all on a journey.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I really do.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, we're proud of you, man. You don't have to do this stuff alone, man. You
I
don't.
appreciate that.
You have a brotherhood. You have a sisterhood out there. People care about you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot.
We're gonna come after you if we have to.
Yeah, don't make me come down there, man.
Absolutely.
Hey, don't forget you're organizing us, and we're all meeting next year at Maroon and Blue, right?
Yes,
That's
ma'am,
right,
we
Aaron.
are. Yep, we're going to be staying at the Win.
Yeah, don't mess that up. That's my birthday weekend. Don't mess that up.
No,
Hey,
ma'am.
we booked off the whole month.
Yeah, I don't want to get her mad. I don't want to get her mad.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Patrick, gosh, this was such a great conversation. Powerful story. I really appreciate how you're taking this painful time, this painful season in your life, and really paying it forward and helping so many others with your story and your courage.
I appreciate it, Sarah.
Wish you the very best. You have a family here. You can come back anytime.
I appreciate it.
We really appreciate having you on.
I appreciate it. God bless you. If I could just leave you with a quote. One of my favorite quotes is by Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase. All you have to do is just take that first step." So God bless everybody. It's an honor being on the show. Sarah, thank you for inviting me on, and please, everybody stay safe. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk to you. Sarah, you have my contact information. You can share it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Just connect with me and I can let you know. Okay. Thank you, Pat.